Obviously, problem gambling is a responsibility, and it's an issue, and it's a concern all year long. But I would think that this would be sort of a focal point of the year, because with the Super Bowl coming up, the sports betting industry will tell you it's one of the busiest weeks of the year. But I would think that also it's a time when folks that have a problem, or maybe don't even know they have a problem, discover such, and there's more gambling in the mainstream, if not legal in their state now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's a great thing to talk about, Brand. I really appreciate the time because I think there's a couple things that your question kind of brings to my mind. One is that the Super Bowl has become essentially a national gambling holiday. And I think it becomes a little bit like March Madness, where perfect strangers are happy to talk to you about their brackets, or perfect strangers and will be happy to talk to you about their prop bets, or whether they think the line on the Bengals is right or not. Whether what color the Gatorade is going to be dumped on the winning coach. And I think for the vast majority of people, that normalization of gambling in our culture actually is probably a good thing, because it allows us to have open and honest conversations around gambling, and hopefully also open and honest conversations about gambling addiction. But we know we're not there yet. We know that gambling addiction is something that breeds in shame and silence and stigma. And so the difficult part for someone who has a gambling problem is when everybody's talking about that line on the Bengals. It you might not know that the person you're talking with has a massive gambling problem, or that is trying to stop. And we know that for a lot of gamblers in the with sports betting. So the second big thing around the Super Bowl is the timing, because traditional sports betting, which is in most sports betting, is still dominated by the NFL, as you said. There's the vast majority of bets are still on the National Football League games. The Super Bowl often represents the last chance for a bettor to make up for a losing season. And traditionally, that has always been something we've heard from people in recovery who are sports bettors. They said, especially if they had a losing season, they would get to the end of the year and they'd put it all on the Super Bowl, or they'd bet enough on the Super Bowl to make up, if they won, make up for all those losses that they'd had. And sometimes they just binge anyway, right? So we knew that there was always some relevance to the timing of this end of year kind of big blowout, or last chance, desperate last chance to make up your losses. Of course, now with modern sports betting, there are games, you can bet on something 24 hours a day, worldwide, global sports. There's none of these dead periods in the calendar anymore. So that it's taken out a little bit of that relevance. And then, of course, you have, as you know, that no, there's never been I'm trying to think how to say this. Americans have Americans have never had access to this much legal sports betting ever in the history of the republic.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that there is an increase in participation. So even if the percentage of people with gambling problems stays the same, that means there's going to be a lot more people betting, and so there's probably a higher number of people with problems. If, as we're concerned, the percentage of people with problems is actually increasing a little bit, then you've got both an absolute number of a larger absolute number of bettors and a higher proportion of those bettors who are developing problems. So, and then I guess so we think that there are a lot more people now at risk for gambling problems in the United States. This is also tied up with things like the pandemic and other things. So it's not solely, of course, due to sports betting. And then last, we talk about what's different this year, perhaps than previous Super Bowls. It's the advertising. It's the accessibility, the action, being able to bet on your credit card through your mobile phone, which now roughly 30% of Americans have access to. We think there are additional risk factors for gambling problems, but there's also, of course, some additional protective factors. So, it's how and why you bet and how you use the tools that are available. Are you setting limits and sticking to it? Have you listened to our commercial that the NFL is running? Great. Then you're maybe reducing risk. But if you're a young person that's just now getting into this, and you're betting a ton of money, and you're betting money you don't have through your credit card, and you're not taking advantage of those limit setting features, there can be some problems.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, that was a long rant. I apologize. I'll keep it, I'll try and keep it short, but like you said, it's an exceptional time for us. We've been doing this, this is our 50th anniversary. So the National Council is 50 years old this year. And I've been at this it'll be my 25th year in October. I don't remember ever a a sense of urgency, a sense of change, a sense of both optimism and pessimism that we've had around the Super Bowl, like we have this year.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's such an interesting point that you make it, and I think a lot of times when vices are discussed, alcohol and gambling sort of get mixed together, for various reasons, good or bad. But the American Super Bowl party is,
Yeah.
and the lead up to it is just sort of like the moment of truth for so many folks. Someone who gets offered a beer who didn't know that they had a problem, or
Right.
I don't know if someone's going to pick Super Bowl squares and that's going to spark something, but it's just the chance to find out that you may have a problem that you didn't know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, all gambling starts recreationally. But age of exposure has an impact. And there's a lot of research to show that the earlier you start gambling, the more likely you may be eventually to have a problem. Knowing that for the vast majority of people, it doesn't matter how young they start gambling, they will never have a problem. So this is still a 2 to 3% issue, but that 2 to 3%, the younger that you start, the more likely you are to wind up in that 2 to 3% of people who have problems. So age of initiation is one thing. It usually starts casually and recreationally, and I think one of the other salient factors is an unexpected big win. So it's unlikely that you're going to have a $10,000 Super Bowl squares, although certainly it's possible. It may be more likely that like we saw in the gambling media a couple of weeks ago, the person that put in a $20 just ridiculous exact score parlay and hit, it's one in 10,000. Powerball odds are probably better than that for this one person to hit this one parlay. But that unexpected big win, and especially if it seems so easy, if it seems so predestined maybe for some people, that can start you down a lifetime of bad expectations towards your gambling, and that is also an early unexpected big win is also linked to gambling problems later in life. So yeah, the casual social nature of gambling is usually protective. And so most of those Super Bowl parties, and even if you're betting squares or if it's small amounts of money, if it's fun, if it's with family and friends, that is probably a lot lower risk than the guy that can't be around that party because it's a whole bunch of just amateurs betting, and instead is sitting in the bathroom on his cell phone making crazy props and parlays and maxing out credit cards, blowing up his accounts, blowing up customer service because they're not going to extend his betting limits or they're shutting him down. It's that person who is gambling alone and gambling because they have to, either because they're chasing a loss or because they're desperate to get their money down or they can't stop. It's the person that's around the tortilla chip bowl, or betting on the Bud Light, whatever, this and that, that there's probably very, very little risk there.
Mm-hmm. How well are the stakeholders doing? I sort of a sub question of this, and I'll come back with the ad blitz. We've all done stories about what it's like to try and watch a football game in D.C. with Maryland, Virginia, D.C. going on. New York is certainly getting just inundated with this. How well are the stakeholders doing to portray responsibility? What can they do better?
I think it's a tale of leaders and it's a tale of followers, and we would certainly say Caesars. Taking the talent that they assembled for their ad and having them cut a separate responsible gambling ad is, really, really, it's well done. It's important. It shows that they're putting their brand behind their responsible gambling message as well. And so I think everyone can look to that and say that Caesars is clearly within this ad campaign is clearly associating their brand with responsible gambling. There's still a lot more. So there's a lot more work that the other leading operators have to be done. There's still a lot more work that the industry in general needs to do along with us and along with mostly with regulators to make sure that for national broadcast, digital, or even regional ads, that operators are allowed to use the national helpline number rather than having to list 25 different state numbers in 1 point font. And the industry, again, is not covering themselves with glory. There's probably ways they could have figured this out a lot better, a lot sooner. They could make that mandated messaging a little bit clearer. But one of the things that is hard for them, and we are working hand in glove with them to fix, is that they are constrained by antiquated state regulation. that was created in a time of landlines and no broadcast advertising, frankly, before even the World Wide Web. An advertisement in our, by a licensed operator in our state has to have our state number. Well, now that all these things have changed, those regulations have to be updated. And there's emerging signs that regulators in Indiana and Ohio, just to name two examples, have given their licensees permission or leeway to use the national number on clearly national, or digital or broadcast ads that are going to be seen, in multiple jurisdictions. And we think that's a really important step forward, because I think when you look at the ads now, and we'll get to the blitz part later, when you look at the responsible gambling messages in these ads now, it is akin to the legal disclosure at the end of a car ad. It is trivial. It is very little amount of time on screen in very tiny font, and it looks like it's compliance based. That's not aspirational. That's not actually trying to reach a customer. That's not associating your brand with a responsible gambling message. That's doing what you're being made to do. And there's a difference in tone, there's a difference in style, a difference in emphasis, and most importantly, a difference in effectiveness. So we're not surprised that while calls to the helpline have grown, they haven't grown a lot, because it is almost impossible to actually find which number you're supposed to call on the bottom of a lot of these ads. And I think the majority of the blame goes to state regulators that are still bound by antiquated definitions of what advertising is and what national advertising is. But, the companies aren't doing themselves a lot of favors either, because it looks like for most of them, it's simply a check the box, and they go on to actually selling their product rather than trying to sell it sustainably.
Yeah. What would a reasonable, socially responsible gambling ad say?
I think we look, as you said, we look a lot to alcohol advertising. There are certain times when the entire ad, like the Caesars ad, it is a responsible gambling message. And I do think there is a natural tension between trying to get someone to gamble and trying to get them to also gamble responsibly. So I think the approach where Caesars has one in every 5, 10, whatever it is, ads dedicated to responsible gambling makes a lot more sense than trying to take 5 seconds of every 30-second ad. But what a message would look like, it has to be authentic to your brand. And that's what we don't see a lot of right now. It's all compliant, almost all of it's compliance based. Caesars is one of the first operators to say, I'm going to put our name and talent behind it. And frankly, the NFL ad is another great example of that. It's not the National Council's ad. It is an ad we suggested the NFL developed. They did it for their own reasons, but they use their creative team. They use their messaging. They were kind enough to send people to a website we built for them, responsibleplay.org. But it is organic to the National Football League. It fits in with their brand, with their image. It's their talent. It's using a retired coach, of the 49ers, as it turns out. And I think you can't overstate the value of that. It is not an NCPG PSA that just happens to appear because the NFL is going to pay for it. It is a NFL ad. Caesars it's a Caesars branded ad. And I think that's what makes, so to your question, what makes it, what we want to see on responsible gambling ads is that it is organic, and you get the sense that it is, for example, DraftKings, that it is a priority for them, that they are going to put a lot of time and money branding that responsible gambling message and having it fit within the rest of their campaign, so that you can see this is an organic and an integral part of their overall messaging. And to date, while they've done a lot of good things, that's not the feeling I get from just about anybody besides this Caesars ad.
Mm-hmm. And circling back, because the ad blitz stories and the questions are well known, and
yes.
You're laughing. It's are you in DC? Where are you?
Yeah, Arlington, Virginia. So
okay,
yeah, so we're in the DMV media market, and I can
see the DraftKings ads flying in through your window behind you right now.
Yeah, mailers. It's physical mail, it's email, it's everything. Yeah.
Now, certainly, it's a cash grab, or it's a game to acquire new customers early. You want to be a first adopter. Some of the buzzwords we hear. companies are going to do it. I mean, the NFL
Yes.
allowed 6 ads, and then you get regional, and then you get local, and that just adds up to a lot. Even though I think insurance companies and car ads are still outnumber them, and it just seems like the sports betting ads, like the old DFS ones, are really in your face. This would have been a time to maybe make the noise a little less noisy by inserting more of these proactive, responsible gambling ads, right? I mean,
Yep.
before someone turns the channel after seeing the same ad for the fourth time, maybe, to borrow from the alcohol ads, drink a glass of water after you've had a couple of
Yeah.
crowns.
Yeah. And I think there's a huge opportunity for branding. As we look at sustainability, as we look at trying to grab market share, trying to position yourself as a company that your friends and your family should be happy that if you're going to bet, you choose this company because they've seen those protective ads. They think this company takes things seriously. I think that's apt, because the other big difference between alcohol and gambling advertising is that um, Anheuser-Busch supplies the beer. They don't actually monitor you while you drink it, and the gambling companies do. So the gambling companies know exactly how much you're betting. They know exactly what you're doing online. And so that's where the analogy breaks down. It's not just that Anheuser-Busch wants you to buy their beer. It is that Caesars wants you to sign up for their app, and they want to know, they want you to spend as much money as possible, hopefully sustainably. But that knowledge, I think, has a lot of people thinking, why aren't these companies leaning more into responsibility? Why aren't you trying to build a brand that you market as safer? It's like trying to advertise a safer car. There's a lot of research that shows customers really like to hear about these safety features, and that cars are very highly rated and they compete on their safety features. I think that's the analogy that we would like to see. I mean, it would almost be like if cars were advertised as, not only can we go the fastest, but, hey, we don't even have any brakes, because bonus, 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 and that's it's you don't see cars being advertised that way. There's a lot of premium placed on safety features, at least for the market that I see. And I don't see, besides Caesar starting to, I don't see anybody putting a premium
Mhm.
on sustainability or safety.
It would seem like the environment is there or growing. I think we're at 30 plus, 30 something states in
Yeah.
some form of implementation is how we generally characterize it, because it fluctuates
Yeah, I know.
all the time. And then someone
Trying
passes
to
a
keep
bill, and
track of
then you
this
get
stuff. Oh, it's insane. Yeah.
it's around 30 is safe now. And with so many of the states adopting mobile, as you said, Caesars or DraftKings, whoever knows what you're betting, knows how much you're betting. They can monitor this. If there's a problem, they have the power to curtail this.
Mhm.
It just seems like if the industry is very concerned about it, they could. Which also leads into, do you find it worrisome the amount of bonusing and free bets that occur when new states open up? Because the numbers that new customers, maybe people who are being initiated to this, it must just be mind boggling, and just encourages them to go, go, go at the start.
It does. We are concerned about some of the language around risk-free bets and bonusing. We think it has a significantly negative impact on those people who have had a gambling problem and are trying to stop or to stay clean. And that, if you're $50,000 down, but you get an offer for 5,000 free bet, well, the gambler thinks I can double that and then double that again, and I'm back level. It has to be almost unbearable and overwhelming to be trying to stop or quit betting and see all these offers. And especially because sports betting, there is a big skill plays a big role. It doesn't account for all the outcome, of course, because the gambling industry is still in business and thriving. There is always a house edge, but it is to say that people who bet a lot and who are more skilled may think that it's literally an offer that you can't refuse. That in your brain and your heart, and in your past experience that you've been a very successful gambler. So right now it's just a temporary financial problem. And if they're offering me free money to get back into the game, then this then and many gamblers will tell themselves, I'll quit as soon as I get ahead. As soon as I get back ahead. And some do, but most don't. Once they resume that cycle of addictive behavior, it's very hard for their brains to let go. So we think about the impact of these offers, bonusing, risk-free bets on people, trying to recover from or stop from the gambling problems. And but one of the other groups that you mentioned earlier are the newcomers. And I'm sure some of the people that are coming into the game now are just chasing bonuses and are probably not going to be serious long-term, big customers. Um, but some might. And I think you're introducing more risk into the system by having people who are coming in chasing these enormous bonuses, enormous offers, and then what happens when you stop? Do they go right back to the offshore? Do they continue to demand this type of bonusing? Yeah, and so the sustainability of the industry from a financial standpoint is not our concern, but I wonder if you're not creating some fairly irresponsible gamblers right from the get-go by accentuating the bonus and the potential win so much rather than the entertainment potential that the modern industry is increasingly says that the modern industry is built around. Because when I look at the advertising in new markets, I don't see a lot about entertainment and fun. I see almost everything about how much money you can win. And that's I maybe, like you say, that's just because it's a new market, but it seems to run contrary to the narrative of sports betting and to the long-term narrative of the company.
I think you quoted the number earlier, but I just want to make sure. What is the latest figure on the amount of people who, I don't know what the qualifier is, that place a bet that end up having a problem? What is that number now?
Yeah, sure. So in the general public, roughly 2.2% of the American public would meet criteria for a gambling problem in a given year. Within that 2.2%, there's a range. There's some people that have very severe problems. There's some people that mild to moderate problems. But that's 2% of the general public. Is we all know, there's still a lot of Americans who don't bet or who haven't bet in the past year. So when you look at active gamblers, which we would define as if you've placed a bet in the past year, that number doubles. So it's about 5% of people who've bet in the past year have, again, some level, indicate to us that they have some level of problems. And then when you start to try break it down as detailed as we can, when you look at people who have actively bet sports in the past week, that number starts to climb even higher than that 5%. And then you add in other demographics like, are you young? Are you male? These risk factors are often cumulative. It's still, most people, even most young male online sports bettors, still do not show any criteria for gambling problems in a given year. But at that point, you're looking somewhere about the 15% range of in our national surveys of 2,000 and 3,000 people, roughly 15% of people who bet sports at least weekly and are young men who bet online at least weekly. That's you've concentrated your risk there.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think cynically some would hear that 2-ish% and think, well, all right, 98% are fine. But that it seems like that would almost create a cynical reaction on the other side. Like, why are we spending millions of dollars to combat that? Yeah. I can see them.
Yeah, and I can too. I mean, I think it's good that it's a low base rate disorder. I think that's fundamentally okay. And the National Council would like that number to go down. So we clearly believe that the vast majority of people who gamble will never develop a problem. But we also believe that there's an ethical imperative, that you need to minimize harm as part of your social license of doing business. Yeah. There's also an economic imperative because those host states and jurisdictions and tribes, if you're taking billions and billions of dollars in revenue and you're only putting thousands back into preventing and treating gambling addiction, guess who bears the costs of all those untreated gamblers? It's that host jurisdiction that has your license, that holds your license. The people who pay for those social costs are the host jurisdictions that control your license. So the industry needs to be very cautious about that backlash because this is a licensed and regulated industry, and those people that license and regulate you are also the ones ultimately responsible for increased criminal justice and healthcare costs. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a balance, right? There's obviously, I think, a way to minimize costs and maximize benefits. And there are certainly, everybody's has a different, perspective on where exactly that balancing point should be, but there is a balancing point. We've achieved that with alcohol. You can always do a little bit better. You can always nudge one way or the other, but by and large, society has accepted that social cost calculation, even as we've tried to further reduce things like drunk driving. But so the analogy for the gambling industry is simply that right now the discussion and the money in the economic benefit is massively weighted towards maximizing revenue. Mm-hmm. And if that gets too far out of balance, it is those very states that regulate the industry that are going to try and pull back, as we're watching in the UK, throughout Europe, Australia, New Zealand. Mm-hmm. This is something that we're actually watching in real time. No one knows where that tipping point is in the United States, but I do think it's like buying insurance for the operators. Spending a couple million to lock in a market that's going to come near 120 billion this year that's the best deal around. I mean, it's literally fractions of a penny for every dollar you bring in a profit. So I think it sells itself both ethically and economically.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of talk. I won't name drop any particular CEOs, but it's sort of been the group think, it seems, from the gambling company heads. Sports betting, it's great. It's rolling out. It's low margin. We don't make a lot of money. If it's online someplace, we want to engage that sports bettor in the future in a game of chance. We want them to have playing some slots on their phone or something else where maybe they aren't very smart about the Packers this week. Is that a troublesome thought for you?
Not really. So the expansion of gambling has been something we've grappled with for the past 50 years. And the National Council is and will always be neutral on legalized gambling. So I think that the type or the form of gambling matters less to us than how it's regulated and who's gambling and why. Mm-hmm. So kids are always off the table. We want to make sure that there is a consistent minimum age, but whatever that minimum age is, that's what should be enforced. And so, for us, what the adult is betting on, whether it's online casino, online sports, there are structural characteristics within each the way the game is structured that may have a little bit of a implication for addiction. But what has a lot more implication for addiction is, did this person grow up receiving messages about prevention of gambling? Have they grown up in a healthy gambling environment where it's not only normalized, but they've learned all their lives, just like we've learned all our lives about alcohol. Don't drive drunk, so don't gamble on credit. Don't drink if you're under 21. All right, don't gamble if you're under 21. Most Americans still have never received a prevention message before while they were in high school. Mm-hmm. And so if we build a better system, a public health system for gambling, then the type of gambling that people do matters a lot less. But we haven't really built a good system. And so so I would also say that as you expand in these different types of gambling, especially in states without much of a services infrastructure, that's where you're going to run into problems. Mm-hmm. And there are certainly ways, of course, that these games could be done in a very predatory manner. Online casino offers a lot more factors for risk if you don't buttress it with good guidelines. But since 2012, we've had our Internet Responsible Gambling Standards. We know how people can operate online casino even with safeguards in place. We just can't get anybody to use them. We can't get government to include them in regulation. Only New Jersey has. We can't get operators to voluntarily comply with those regulations, and we can't get vendors to build their games to those standards. So I feel like we've done a lot that we could do, and it's really up to the government and the gambling industry to try and adopt these best practices if they really want to minimize harm and build a sustainable industry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. Last question for you. I really appreciate your time. Every time we get close to a big sporting event, we get inundated by Mattress Mack's latest big bet. I'm sure you're familiar with Mattress Mack.
Yes.
To me, he's sort of become the Colonel Sanders of bad bettors, in this realm. Everybody, well, I don't think everyone does. I'm sure you know the backstory. He uses it as a hedge against his promotions with his insurance company. But he's put out there as sort of like this this ultra whale. He's betting $5 million. Look at that. It's that guy bet that much money. Is he a force for not good or the publicity that surrounds this man?
So it's a great question about Mattress Mack. I think it cuts two ways, and I do think that that there are some people out there who see him as an example, who think that they should be betting in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions. That's normal, So he can encourage a perception that excessive these large bets are what most people do, and Mattress Mack is an outlier by many multiples. Um, but it can also be a cautionary tale because it's hard to tell, but he may actually have, before some of these bets, he may have had a net loss. And so, I think there's a lot of people that might think twice when they realize that, he could be down a couple $1 million. And as you say, most people outside gambling Twitter don't realize that he's really just hedging, and so, and I think from that aspect, that's a very fascinating aspect. Most of us have no commercial investments that are in the millions of dollars, so that we have to have a couple $1 million hedge. So he's an atypical bettor in a lot of ways. And it would be so yeah. So I think it cuts both ways, and I just hope that we always remember to make sure that we're looking at a net. When we look at the amount of money he's spending, always look at the amount he's losing too, and then you have a more balanced picture of it. That's what's hard, because he actually, I think he's a little bit different than most, in that he does talk about his losses. He seems to be fairly open about where he is, he's up or he's down. Most gamblers don't, though, and we know that the less you remember your losses, the more likely you are to be someone with a problem. So it's always it's always sunshine, it's always optimism amongst people who are chasing that big loss, because they're always one bet away from winning everything back. And to the extent that he demonstrates a little bit of behavior that some people would call chasing, I think is a warning sign. But it does. But again, I think when you understand what he says he's doing, hedging is not chasing. And so I think that chasing behavior is obviously throwing sort of good money after bad. You're betting more and more to win back your losses, and there is an element of that. His bets are increasing. It sounds like his furniture promotions are increasing too. That's one of the reasons he's hedging. Hard to tell from the outside, but it's a great question. It's something that we've thought more than a little bit about. As you said, is it mostly a cautionary tale? Is it mostly a heroic aspiration to be like Mattress Mack? And I think a lot of it depends on how and why you're gambling.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gambling to win big bucks, and if your whole identity is tied up in your role as a successful sports bettor, if you're gambling to impress your friends or to make rent, these are all, that you may want to try and be like Mattress Mack. If you're someone who's gambling with friends and family, and it's money that is recreational for you, you're nowhere near, you're never going to be like Mattress Mack. And so that's a lot of it that goes to us, helping individual bettors make good long-term decisions around their gambling. And for him maybe it works, but for most people he's far from it.
Yeah. Did you say he's actually been a topic of conversation at the council? You guys have?
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, we and not just because we've been asked about it in the media. We certainly we think about these high-profile figures. We think and we hope he never has a problem. We hope it never turns into a very public, losses in the tens of millions of dollars. We hope he never gets himself into trouble or his family's affected. But yeah, it's definitely something. He's one of the most prominent bigger bettors. We know there are people that probably bet a lot more. So yeah, so it's interesting to us to follow, and it also reflects the normalization. I think 10 years ago he wouldn't have been so public. I think it's now become a lot more acceptable in society to be a big bettor in a way that it wasn't before. And again, I think there's probably some benefits to that. I think there's probably some benefits to everybody having a little bit more of a conversation about what that looks like. Yeah. So, we'll try and take the positive. We'll try and spin the, use it for use it to help have that teachable moment. That, problem gambling awareness week, problem gambling awareness month, which is in March. The theme of problem gambling awareness month is have the conversation. So if a crazy, huge multimillion-dollar bettor like Mattress Mack helps us have a conversation with a 23-year-old young male sports bettor, that there's a teachable moment there. There's something to that. So that's where we embrace that.
Very good. I would assume that everyone in Texas ought to have a new mattress by now with all the things he's lost on the Astros.
It seems interesting, his model, but it's hard to tell from the outside, but hopefully it works for him.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, interesting, dude. Keith, that's all I had for you. I really appreciate your time today. It's always really good to catch up and get your insights on these things, especially this time of year.